All right. Hi, everyone. Today we've got with us Terry McLane, an inspector who has over 44 years inspecting refineries across the United States. Great to have you here, Terry. Thanks for joining us. Greg, great to see you as always.
Well, I want to tell you, Terry, so happy that you agreed to be our guest on today's podcast because I've always looked at you as like the quintessential chief inspector, and that background that you had and how you earned it over all the years. I mean, how did you get started? Were you like welding first or doing anything else? How'd you get started in inspection?
Actually, I started out in the plumber. I went to the plumbing and pipefitting apprenticeship in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and started out as a plumber. And then work got slow downtown as a plumber. And my boss asked me, he said, "Well, do you want to go out to the refinery and work out there for a while?" At the time, it was to go to from residential as a plumber to go out and work industrial in the refinery. That was a $3 an hour raise. And so
Cool.
I said, heck yeah, I'll go out there. It's kind of a lucky thing because even though I got out of the apprenticeship as a plumber, plumbers can be pipe fitters, but pipe fitters can't really go back and do plumbing. It doesn't work out very well, but it's a pretty easy transition for a plumber to go out and be a pipe fitter.
Okay.
And after you get into the welding or pipe fitting, then it's a pretty good deal. So that's how I ended up out the refinery, a contractor.
Yeah.
And I worked at that refinery in Cheyenne for 3 years as a contractor, and then the maintenance superintendent just asked me, said, "Do you want to go work for Husky Oil?" I said, "Gee, let me think about that." And I gave him an answer 30 seconds later, said, "Paid off, paid sick leave, paid vacation, you're darn right I will." So that next Monday, I went to work for what was then Husky Oil.
Wow.
And we that
What year would
refinery,
that have been, Terry? About what year would that have been?
that was in, oh my goodness, that was in 82.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, second week of January 1982 is when I first went out. It was at 82 when I first went out to the refinery. And then I hired on as a contractor. Then I hired on at February 1st in 1985 and working for the refinery itself.
When would it change from Husky to Frontier? Or did it change from
Well,
Husky to Frontier?
it changed from Husky to Winoco or to RMT Enterprises to Winoco. That we were under numerous ownership. And then we went to Frontier sometime in the mid or late 90s.
Okay.
And then in 2000, we went from just the refinery in China that we bought Eldorado Canvas. Then we became two refineries
Right.
at
Right.
Frontier.
That's a lot going on there. Were
Yeah.
there any things you did as a plumber that you feel like helped you in inspection? Like, was there anything about your attitude or how you viewed work and what you did that you think helped you be in the right
Yeah.
mindset for inspection?
Well, and just a work ethic. I mean, when you're working as a contractor, or whether you're a plumber outside or whether you're a contractor at the refinery, I mean, you better have a darn good work ethic because if you don't work, you don't get paid. So you work hard and you put in a lot of overtime, and that's just the way it was back then.
Who were your biggest influences back then when you first started in inspection?
When I got into the inspection, because I worked as a fitter in a maintenance and dabbled with a little bit of welding way back then, because I worked in maintenance from 82 until I think 85. I worked in a maintenance area. And then in 91, actually, is when the engineering manager asked me if I wanted to go work in inspection. And so I'd been in the maintenance and the fitter group for about 7 years. And a guy named was Tommy Wozniak. He was the engineering manager finally, because
I remember Tommy. Yeah.
yeah, because I was one of the guys that always volunteered for overtime, and like I said, that's the only way to get ahead is working your butt off. So, he asked me if I'd like to move into the inspection department, and I thought I had to think about that a little bit because that was the move where it was a salary position, lose all the overtime. So I took that time I took a $13,000 a year pay cut, which was a lot back then. and
Yeah.
went into inspections. I looked around, I looked around to see how many old pipe fitters and welders there were that with their backs and knees and shoulders are, in bad shape. I said, maybe this will be a little easier on the body, but I don't think I left the trade soon enough.
Okay.
But that's how I started in the inspection group. But basically, started out part time in '91. So at that time, it was just me and Augie. And then short time after that, in right around '94, when I took my national board exam, Augie had left. He quit, and it was just me, and I took over.
Yeah.
I ran solo for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I forgot you were an AI. Yeah, that's pretty cool. What did you think? What do you think of? Okay, here's one that's probably some people out there wonder about. Which test do you think is harder to pass? Is it the AI test or the 510, 570 tests?
What's the AI test? Real quick for everybody.
It's a national board exam.
And that's authorized inspector?
Well, you can become an authorized inspector if you choose to go that route.
Okay.
And I did take the national board exam. And the national board exam is by farther harder than any other test. And back then, it wasn't multiple choice. It was a lot of NSA and hand calculation. You had to do a reinforcement calculation by hand. And I had, but the whole test was 12 hours. The first day, 8 hours, it was all math. And you had 10 math questions to do, and you had 8 hours to do it. And that reinforcement calculation took me, that's a 4-hour calculation, and for 3.5 pages worth of count. So, yeah, that was believe me, when I got done with that test, I wanted to drink heavily. Yeah. And then the second day was a 4-hour follow-up test, and that was all code questions.
Okay.
Did you want to take those on your own? Were you the driver to take those, or did Frontier ask you to take those?
Well, Frontier asked at that time. Yeah, that Frontier asked us to. Augie had taken it, and he pushed me. Said, well, you need to take your national board, and then that was back in the day. If you pass your national board, they gave you the 510. So I passed the national board exam, and then they gave me the 510, and then years later, the 570 came out. I grandfathered in on the first time around. And then I finally went and took it. Then after 3 years, I went and took the test 570. That was pretty easy compared to some of the other stuff.
How do you feel about the role of the 510 certification in the industry? Has it helped you out a lot?
Oh, heavens, yes. Yeah, that's it's a must. I mean, in order to get along in this in our industry, you need your certification. You have to have that 510 or 570. If you're going to go into tanks, you have to have the 653. And then 580, that's another one you got to have. I mean, if you're going to do RVI, you need your 580. Then if you're going to get into ICP, then it helps to have those certs, because if you're going to be preparing tests for everybody else and doing that, you need to be able to walk.
Do you volunteer for that with API?
Yeah, I've been on ICP for like 15 years now.
What is? I know ICP is something different probably than what you know it as. So what is ICP?
ICP is the individual certification program through API.
Yeah,
and that's where it's tested. There's a bunch of us. We help with writing test questions, reviewing test questions, and as the code changes, you have to develop more test questions and get rid of some of the old words. And it's a constant cycle. And as folks take the test of the API exams, well, then they can challenge questions. So those are called pin calls, and I'm associated with that bunch of folks too. So we get on the pin calls of Holly Decker. We go through the questions and decide whether the challenge is legitimate or not. And if they get maybe double key it and say, yes, you got it correct, or no, that's challenges. They just weren't thinking, or you've got the wrong answer, period.
Yep.
I've been doing quite a while there.
I got a question for you. So how do you guys get coached that are writing the questions about, do you write questions to intentionally trip people up, or what's the objective?
No, we would only try to trick you. See? No, you don't. And that's the thing you try to stay away from. You don't want to do trick and trap, because that's not fair to the candidate. Because you got to remember, these tests are designed for the 3-year entry-level candidate. So granted, we want it to be a hard enough test, but on the same hand, we can't make it, like your PhD engineer's got to pass our thing. That's not fair.
Right.
So that's what we keep in mind. And then you want, when you do write the test, you need one correct answer, and then you need 3 distractors. And a lot of times it's easy coming up with the right answer. A code book, you can pick that out word for word, but coming up with the detractors and think that could be possibly right or, might be plausible, those are the ones that are harder to come by. And the ICP group, they give us, parameters on how to write test questions and all that kind of stuff. So it's a long drawn out process. What most people don't know is there's one hell of a lot of science that goes into test development. It's not just throwing test questions out there. I mean, there's a lot to it.
How so? Well, like the science.
They look at how many candidates pass the test, how many candidates don't pass. They look at the experience, how many candidates passed this test, and then what was the biserial of that? Was it too hard of a question, too easy of a question? It's not a simple thing. It's like I said, it's a whole other science thing that goes into writing test questions, reviewing, and trying to make it good and fair. John Reynolds and I were probably the ones that we complained about the most. We always thought there should be way more welding questions on the test. Because everything you do, whether it's 510, 570, 650, all your repairs are done by welding. So, yeah. But,
that is a great point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It also forces the inspector to learn a little bit about metallurgy too, in Section 9, and all that kind of stuff. It's good experience.
But the way the tests are set up, they're called ICS codes, and you have to have so many questions out of scope, so many questions over NDT, so many questions over welding, so many questions over other general items. So you have to break up and pull test questions out of every single phase of the document. So you can't just load it 100% up with welding questions or 100% with roles and responsibilities. You got to mix it all up and get a good representation of everything.
Mm.
Oh,
very good.
Which type of questions do you like writing the most?
Well, I like writing welding questions. And
Go figure.
Yeah, I'm also a CW guy, so coming up as a maintenance guy, that's my background: maintenance, welding, and being a CW guy and tracking a lot of welds and piping welds and stuff. That's what I love.
That's cool. I remember when we were talking about those coke drums that I didn't even realize Mobile had a refinery in East St. Louis, Illinois at one time, in Sojay, Illinois, which is essentially East St. Louis, a big industrial area. And that's when we first met. We were talking about the coke drum and how, if I remember right, they cut that thing apart. I don't know if they air arc gouged it or how they did it, but they cut it apart. And they cut it right on the welds, I think, Terry, if I remember right.
And rebuilt them, yes.
Yeah, and I know there were a lot of concerns about that, and rightfully, justifiably so. But so if you were talking to a young inspector right now who loves inspection and loves, they think they got a great career ahead of them, which they probably do. But what are if you had to name 5 or 10 key things that if you were developing a young inspector who came up under your wing, what would you want them to learn?
Yeah, well, first off, I made a habit when I was at first, and I like to hire my guys out of maintenance because they had a good mechanical background with them. Mm-hmm. So coming out of maintenance, you've already established you got a good mechanical background. When I was chief of Cheyenne, the way I geared my trade was we get them all their NDT level, UT thickness, and then their PT and RT film interpretation. But the RT film interpretation took a little longer because you had to have a lot of hours of reading film before you can get your level 2. So we got that. Next step was a CWI. You got to be a certified welding inspector. After that, then you get your 570 because, it's just a progression. CWI, 570, 10. And then if you want, get the 653. And then later on, then you start working at 580, 581 and source inspector. I mean, that's where it all goes.
Do you still have one of those AWS, CWI handbooks? Remember the brown ones? I love that thing. And I learned a lot about how to read drawings and a lot of funky things that I may not have come across if I didn't have that handbook. It was pretty helpful.
That's kind of the progression I like to take. And as you're developing your people that work for you, you find out certain people really like piping and pressure vessels, and other people really like tanks. So you gear your training towards what they really like, because people are going to be successful at what they really enjoy doing.
I agree.
You know, I had a couple of guys that just loved the dickens out of tanks. And it's just, I thank the good Lord that they love tanks, because I could care less about tanks. You know, and that's why I never got a 653. You know, I had two guys that were 653s. They loved tanks. Those two guys, they hated piping and pressure vessels. So
Somebody's got to love tanks, because if those things fail, we're in the world of hurt.
Yeah,
Whatever they do,
yeah.
right?
Well, that's one of the biggest things. When you're training people, hear them for what they really like, what they love to do.
Yeah.
They'll be more successful.
Great advice.
Yeah.
Say that one more time, Terry. Gear them toward what?
When you train folks, gear them toward what they really love to do.
Yeah.
I mean, because they're going to be more successful.
Thank you.
If they have a passion about one field or another, you know, let them search that field. I mean, if a guy loves UT, great. Have him be a UT phased array or shearway, and let them get great at it. But if they love vessels of piping, do the 510, 570.
Do you think it's important for a pressure vessel or piping inspector to have at least some minimum knowledge of metallurgy and how they're going to encounter that in their job?
Oh yeah, oh definitely. I mean, that's something I wish I would have had early on in my career. It's a little more background on metallurgy.
Yeah,
you get that as you go along.
Yeah,
and if that's something you can really pick up earlier on in your career, it's much better. That's what's nice about the 571 damage mechanism stuff. See, back in the day when I first started, there was no such thing as a 571.
right.
So it was picking up the phone, calling guys like Garrett Bootheim all the time, saying, "Hey, what do I do here? What's this? What's that?"
Mm-hmm.
So that's how you learn. You know, just bits and pieces.
Yeah, agreed.
And you keep working at it.
But yeah, you kind of remember it better like that too. You don't have the luxury of sitting in a training course. Well, maybe you do. I know I've seen some metallurgy for non-metallurgist courses out there, metallurgist courses and other things, but it seems like it sticks better when it's actually applied. You know, when you're standing out there and you're looking at something that's, let's say, for instance, you've got polythionic acid, stress corrosion cracking on your heater tubes. It's a big difference looking at it in a book versus standing right next to it inside of the heater and looking at it and see what it looks like and how it happens. It sticks with you,
Yeah, it does. Things like that will stay with you big time. When I first started out as a plumber, I guess that's when you develop kind of a love for code.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed old book that. And so it was a really good transition getting into inspection, because that's what we did with is all codes. And I'm one of those weird geeky guys that take the code books home and read them as nighttime reading. That's the fun part of it. Whether it be 9 or 5 or whatever, it's
I love it. It's good to go to sleep to that kind of stuff. Let's speed of sleep. All right. So would you share with Brandon and I and our listeners what are some of the most memorable inspections that you've ever done in your life? Like what, that you thought that was really cool?
Oh boy. Well, back in the day, whenever we had turnaround, when I was a young guy getting into the business, I was trying to find the oldest guy on the crew that came in. And as soon as I found out who that was, I made friends with that man. And I put myself in his pocket and I followed him around like a puppy dog, old turnaround. I would ask questions, what are you looking at here? Why are you going here? Why are you looking over this? Why are you looking at this frame? Why are you looking at this dimension? And he'd go back, he's writing a report, and I'd pick up his report and I'd read through everything he wrote up. Then I'd go back into the vessel a lot of times and say, I see what he's looking at, exactly what it was. Yeah. And that's how you learn. You put your pocket with those old guys and follow around and learn. I'll never forget this one time. We were in a tail gas unit and there in China. I mean, this is another one that we tore down at our plant. We get down the bottom of the vessel and here's this threaded plug sticking in the bottom of the vessel. I'm looking and the guy with another old guy, and he could see I had this really squirrely look on my face. He said, "What are you looking at?" I said, "Well, I'm looking at that plug, and I'm trying to figure out what in the world is doing there." He goes, "Young man," he said, "we're going to do a little experiment. Let's do this." We got done crawling through the tower, and then we went back on the outside. He said, "Let's remove the insulation right where we think that plug was at on the inside." So we turned the insulation off, we get it removed, and lo and behold, there's a plug on the outside. I'm looking at that. I said, okay. I said, I give up. I said, you got to explain. He said, this is how UTs used to be done. I said, what? Yes. He said, we used to drill a hole through the vessels, reach in and measure the thickness. He said, and then we put a plug on the inside or plug on the outside. And he said, with that, back in the day, that's the only way they knew how to check thickness. So that tells you how old that piece of equipment was.
Yeah.
What an eye-opener.
Yeah.
And then, and because when I first started up, we actually had the thickness meter was the old brick, the old red brick. Yeah. And it was digital. But
was it a D meter to the old D meter brick?
No, it was even older than that.
Oh, the Sonoray. The Sonoray.
Yeah. And then I graduated to the DMEDL from Trout Painter Grads and River Boats.
Oh, yeah.
And that was my D meter of choice for years and years. I could nail thicknesses up to 950 degrees on that thing. I did that one time actually at it was our reactor overhead line, our FCC at it. And I shouldn't UTs, and it was right. It was hotter than the Dickens, and shouldn't UTs, and it would just flash. It would just flash for a second. So I kept writing all the UTs down, and then with the ITEP couplet, when we did come down, I went back and checked on my reason. That thing was spot on. I was amazed.
Awesome.
Huh. How much of that is the tool, and how much is that the operator?
Good question.
Probably a little bit of both. I mean, you had to make sure that you had to have the ITEP couplets. It's a matter of timing, and you learn on the job with everything.
You think technique is huge, isn't it, Terry?
It is. And you can't rock your transducer. I mean, you got to lock it on and get it right there in one shot, because that thickness would flash real quick.
Mm-hmm. On that high temperature stuff, were you using a temperature correction factor for the acoustic velocity?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we did.
Because some people would heat up the calibration block and then calibrate on a hot cal block too. But 900 degrees ain't nothing you want to mess around with any more than you have to.
Not.
Did you have to have like the asbestos gloves on or any of that kind of stuff? Or?
I had welding gloves on. Little warm to get hugging up too close to it.
Well, and the other thing, in inspectioneering years ago, we ran a series of articles from a guy. You remember Mike Badine with Phillips 66? He was inspection manager before you were at Borga, quite a few years before you were, but he did a series on Telltale holes. Have you ever heard of those, Brandon?
Oh, yes.
I have. I was actually going to ask Terry if the welded or if the threaded plugs were before or after Telltales.
The welded plugs were before Telltale holes.
Before Telltales. Okay. Yep. Yeah. Can you explain Telltales for those who don't know?
Well, back in the day, Phillips was not the only ones that did it. East Aquatic Mobile, they actually did it too, because a lot of the piping we got from our Courier and our Coker was rebuilt from that East Aquatic Mobile plant. And numerous, we had dozens of lines that had Telltale holes in it. And what they were is they were drilled. There were holes actually drilled in the pipe about 1/8 of an inch deep, but they were staggered along the pipe. It was a way for them to kind of give you an indication of your pipe is corroding, and you're about to ready to retire your pipe. Once you had a leak through the Telltale, then it give you an indication that you're spinning your line.
Yeah.
Now, in Borger, when I was down there, they actually had a procedure they perfected with driving pins in. So once a Telltale hole started leaking, they had pins. They drive them in and break them off, and away they go. And then they knew there's time to replace. I can't remember when they finally quit doing that. It was in 2012 or something like that. Phillips finally quit putting Telltale holes in all their piping and created stuff.
Yeah, I can tell you, I've been in a pharmaceutical facility, and they had Telltales, and they were coated with PTFE coating on the inside. So as you're looking, but the crazy part with this one was that it wasn't at the back end of the hole. It wasn't still metal. It was the coating. So it was to let them know that the coating had failed. But I will tell you, walking right along that catwalk area, I mean, that thing is pointing right at you, and I'm looking at it, I'm like,
oh man,
is that what I think that is? And the guy's like, yeah, I'm going to keep walking. I'm getting away from that thing.
Yeah. We had them all over the place too, especially in our crew deck that we rebuilt up there. And we needed to weld them all up, grab them up, weld them all up.
Yeah.
So we could replace the pipe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I was blown away that it seemed like a fairly new facility that I was in. And They were using it for the coat. It was just to show the coating failed. So interesting. You mentioned you would hook yourself up with all the old guys. A lot of times old guys are crusty and crotchety. Did you have a method to sweeten them up a little bit and open up to you?
No, I was just open and honest with them, said, look, I'm here to learn. And sometimes you get a gift to gab or whatever, and you just talk to people like they're normal human beings. And all I want to do is I just express to them, I just want to learn.
Yeah.
So I want to get in your pocket and follow you around. I said, teach me. And 99% of the time, you'll always find an old guy that says, when they find somebody that's open and willing to listen to them, that's what it's all about.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm the old guy. If I get young guys that are asking questions and want to learn something, man, that's what it's all about, is sharing knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Letting them know what the heck's going on. This is, we're not making cookies in this business. So trying to keep everybody as safe as you can. That's what it's all about.
Amen, brother. Yep.
The more you can teach the younger folks, the better off we are.
Yes, sir.
For sure. For sure. Yeah. Open and honest is honestly a really great way to go. I mean, people have a BS meter, and as soon as that starts going off, like, sorry, I'm out.
No, you can't be. You got to be open minded. You can't be arrogant. You're just because you're younger. Everything. You got to be open minded and want to learn. Another old guy used to jump within. We had our HF alky unit came down one time in China. And we got in our mixer settler, and lo and behold, what had happened is we had hydrogen blister. It actually went to the outside of the vessel when I discovered it. So I found this blister on the outside of the vessel, and it was on our acid mixer settler. And pretty soon, we shut the unit down and we brought in a guy. Actually, his name was George Netfer from UOP. So we went into this vessel, and man, I'm telling you what, it was so cool. From an inspection standpoint, it was the coolest thing you ever want to see, because in this one shell course, the second shell course from the top, there was hydrogen blisters all over the place. And George Decker said, man, he said, I'm telling you what, young man, he said, what you're seeing here, take note. He said, you will likely never see anything this bad in your life again. And haven't since. We actually had, in that one shell course, we had a 2-foot diameter blister that had, the apex was 3 or 4 inches off of the wall. I mean, wow, it was incredible.
Yeah.
And ruptured, but it just took that metal and just split, just split that shell almost in half. It was cool.
Did you guys drill it out or not?
No, we ended up, no, that'd have been enough hydrogen to light up the city. No, we ended up replacing it in our vessel. Yeah. Then there were so many blisters in that second shell course. It was just nasty, dirty steel. But he was right that blisters all over the place. But seeing that 1-2 foot in diameter sticking 4 inches off the wall, I mean, just blows out like crazy when it's not. Yeah, that was pretty awesome.
Now, did that vessel come over from Mobile as well? Sakoni?
No, that was that's one that we had when they built the plant. That alky was built, I think, in 1972.
Okay. Well, what do you think, Terry, in today? What are the big differences about how inspection is done today in the profession of being a professional, pressure vessel, piping, tank inspector? How do you think it's different? It's grown or evolved to today, and what do you see as the biggest challenges we have that an inspector has, let's say in refineries today?
Oh, man, learning all the new technology. I mean, technology is just expanding all the time. Every time you turn around, there's something new. I mean, back when I first got in, you never heard about phase direct. This thing, there was no such thing as RBI. But those are things that, as an inspector, you've got to embrace change. So if you're not open and willing to change, you're going to get buried. And it'll run you over, because there are new technologies and new things come along all the time. RBI is probably one of the best things that happened to our industry. And that's what I learned. You inspect the stuff you really need to more. The stuff that just sits there and does its job, doesn't corrode, doesn't pit, doesn't crack, leave it alone. Don't spend money on it. Spend your money where you need to.
Right.
And then the new technology with the phase array stuff, it's like, holy mackerel. I mean, what they can do with UT nowadays is amazing. I mean, when they're finding micro cracks for HCHA,
Right.
that's just, and there's technicians out there that can do it. I mean, we all know who they are. They're fantastic guys, you know.
Yep.
I grew up a little bit more depending on the RT end. So I've read tens of thousands of pieces of bill. I can pick anything out of that. But when it comes to phase array and UT shearwave and stuff like that, that's not my bag of tricks. That's for those real high-tech guys that like that black box magic.
A lot of stuff going on there. I remember, maybe you can refresh my memory about this, Terry. What year was it when, I think it was in section 5 of the code, when we started allowing UT and PAUT in lieu of RT?
And I don't remember that when that was.
That was big for us back then. You know,
It
that was a big deal.
Even when we're building new vessels, section 8, when you put a nozzle into a new vessel, they might do some PT on, you know,
Right.
It doesn't require any phase array, and that just drives me nuts.
Yeah.
So anytime I have a new vessel built, whether it's whatever was back in my old when I was an overall owner operator, or if I'm helping people now, like up here at Newcastle, we're having some more vessels built at the fab shop, and one of the things I assist on is getting phase array on all those nozzles to shell attachment welds.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you how many times, back in the day, I get in there, you're doing a wet mag on a vessel, and here's this linear indication, you start grinding out. Pretty soon, that darn thing opens up, sliding position, clear the reef bags, like, or you drop them on the ground. Yeah, it's
right. It was like, well, was that here before or not? I don't know. But if phased array, you can watch it.
You eliminate that. You're good more. You don't have to worry about it more.
Greg, Google says 1996.
No,
96.
thanks. That was 96.
Yep.
Dang,
Good.
Time flies.
Code case 2235, in case either of you remember that specifically.
Wow. Well, no.
I remember the first two numbers, but not the other ones.
Yeah.
I'm doing good to remember 6010 and 7018.
There you go. So much to talk about. It's insane,
There is. If I'm a young person, I'm, 20 something years old, 20 years old, and I'm working in a refinery. I know in the old days, they used to say the real badge that inspector wanted to have was to be the FCC unit inspector. That was right. That was a big deal. Why do you think that was, Terry?
Cats are different. I mean, they're different than most other processing. I don't know what it is.
Maybe the catalyst and all that stuff that's going on.
Maybe the catalyst is flowing. Yes, because, in other units, your catalyst is in a fixed bed reactor or whatever. It's just sitting there.
Yeah.
So the catalyst flowing there is just kind of a cool thing. I was fortunate because, when you work for a smaller refiner as an inspector, especially when there's only one or two or three of you, you have to learn all the units.
Yeah.
So you have to learn the DHDS, the cat cracker, the coker, the alky, whether it be UOP or pelletized, you have to learn them all. Unlike, unfortunately, some inspectors, they get stuck in a large refinery and they get pigeonholed. Well, you're going to be the light oils inspector. And that's all they don't get exposed to the cat. They don't get exposed to a coke or whatever, but you get limited that way. So I was fortunate with early in my career, to work in a smaller facility where you had to learn everything.
Why do you think they do that? I mean, on the operations side, they're moving the process engineers around all the time. Why do you think they're not moving the inspection people around?
Because it takes a long time for process engineers too, but maybe it's a little easier transition for the process engineers go from one unit to the next. And you're right, they do that about every 2 or 3 years. And it used to drive us inspectors crazy because as soon as you get a good process engineer that's nailed everything you got down, they pull them up and pull it out from under you, and then it seems like you got to train another one that they can just like, dang it, leave them alone for a little while. And inspectors, I mean, if it takes a good 5 to 7 years to know a couple good processes, and then by the time you get your unit all fixed up, the inspector doesn't want to leave. Hey, I got all the inspection, singing a song on my units. I know where everything's at. I got everything set up. Don't be giving me Joe Blow's, they don't have to start all over again and get it all set up. So I think that may be part of it, but whether they like to admit it or not, they kind of get territorial, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, they got that ownership piece to it of
Exactly. Yeah.
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 So do you know any good inspector jokes or sayings?
The one that one of our engineers are shy on, you say, arguing with a inspector like wrestling with a pig. Pretty soon you realize that they both love it. But, that's it, wrestling in the mud.
That's so true.
And it was always fun to argue with the engineers. And I got all the respect in the world for our mechanical engineers and all the chemical. They're very, very smart people. I mean, you learn a heck of a lot from them.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and that's a key thing. You got to work together. And that was one of the biggest things we had. When you're a smaller refiner, you don't have the luxury of having a home office to go back and calling your chief metallurgist or metallurgical engineers to get a lot of support, engineering support. There's a lot of times that you had to learn it on your own. And when you got truly stumped, then you pick up the phone and say, what the heck do I got going on here?
Have you ever had to interact with the state boiler inspectors? The
Nope,
chiefs?
didn't have to do that in Wyoming. We did not have a state agency.
It's not a state. It wasn't. Okay. And Texas is not a code state either per se.
Yes, the state inspectors did come to board when we were there. I had one gal that worked for me there, and she took care of all that.
Okay. I was going to ask if there was any advice you could give our listeners about how to interact with regulators. You don't?
That's a tough one.
I think he just told it to us. He said he had somebody else deal with it.
Yeah, exactly. When it comes to state border inspectors, I know the gal that worked for me, Stephanie Howard, in our border, she was really good. She knew how to work those guys and work with them. Like I said, it's working with them, not working against them. And like, you got to work with them.
Educate
them. She knew their personality. She knew them very well. She knew them she was fantastic when it comes to that.
That's awesome.
I never had to deal with that. That's okay. Pictures is a whole different story. I've been part of it many times.
Do you prefer to audit or get audited?
As much experience as I have being audited, it doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
I've been audited by everybody from insurance companies, EPA, to whoever, other API, you name it. I've had John Reynolds and Chad Pesky pick on me numerous times. You just get used to it, and you're working to make things better, and that's all there is. A lot of folks in the industry don't realize that. I mean, it's a little bit different when you're doing like an API where they're coming in and hitting you with, here's all your results, and here's where you got room for improvement, as opposed to another agency like the Department of Environmental Quality or the EPA, where they're actually coming out there to make salary and hang you.
Yeah.
It's a different deal.
Yeah. You can actually create a relationship, I found, with the state boiler inspectors. It just treat them respectfully, educate them. They want the place to operate safely. Absolutely. And they don't want to shut you down, but if you're not behaving responsibly and you're putting people's lives at risk unnecessarily. Was either of those two refineries part of the OSHA VPP, the Voluntary Protection Plan, or they didn't apply because of?
No, I never dealt with it. I've had OSHA auditors come in before, not on the emphasis program. No.
Yeah, because I had heard that program, one of the requirements is that somebody like you essentially has the authority to shut the plant down if something's seriously wrong and not right.
Dude, I've done it before.
Really?
Oh yeah. Yeah. There was a time, I'll never forget, what was our cat cracker? We had a reactor riser line. I got a call in the middle of the night from a kid who was running the unit. His name was John Augerzak. He said, we got these little bulges all over our reactor riser. I said, oh, you're right there. So here I go out there flat in the middle of the night. And sure enough, I mean, here's all this, these 1 inch to inch and a half diameter bulges that were on the reactor riser line about that second, just probably 10 to 15 foot up from the oil nozzle. And we both decided, I said, John, I don't like what I'm seeing. I'm not real comfortable with it. I said, let's shut it down. Let's shut the cat.
Wow.
And he called the phone and said, we're shutting the cat down. Terry and I decided we're shutting it down because we have a concern with the reactor riser line. And that's the way it is. We just did it. That was our shutdown authority. We shut it down. Right down in there.
Wow.
So it's a good thing nowadays.
Yes, sir. Yes,
and then we
sir.
went in, picked out the refractory, found out that's where they'd actually gouged into the base of the shell and ratchet riser line. And it was
Kidding.
bulging it out. So we ended up replacing a section.
Wow,
Yeah.
man.
It was, but see that on the outside when the unit's still running, that was, pissed the freak out a little bit.
How big a diameter was that line when you guys were looking at it?
What was that? 30-inch diameter?
Yeah. So
Yeah, I think our ratchet riser line was 30-inch diameter.
seeing those bulges, it's a little different than, something a little, I don't know, maybe a little bit smaller line. That's got to be pretty,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it gets your attention, I'll tell you that.
yeah,
Mhm.
for sure. For sure.
Good call.
Okay, we'll leave it here for now, and let's talk through RBI in the next episode. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you for listening to Upon Further Inspection, a mechanical integrity podcast. This episode was co-created by Inspectioneering and Core Solutions. Our producers are Nick Schmoyer, Jocelyn Christie, and Jeremiah Wooten. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute legal or professional advice. Listeners should seek their own qualified advisors for guidance. If you enjoyed this episode, please join us next time wherever you listen to your podcast. Until then, stay safe and stay informed.